Welcome to Hollywood Secrets Information. And in this video, we're going to uncover some of the most extreme R-rated fantasy films that shocked audiences and even made Hollywood studios nervous. Fantasy movies are usually filled with magical kingdoms, heroic quests, and mythical creatures. But some filmmakers took the genre in a much darker direction. These films mixed magic with disturbing themes, brutal realism, and mature storytelling that pushed fantasy far beyond traditional family entertainment. From haunting fairy tales to violent mythological epics, these movies proved that fantasy could be beautiful, terrifying, and controversial all at the same time. Some were criticized, some were banned in certain regions, and others eventually became cult classics that reshaped the genre today. We're diving deep into dark fantasy cinema history and exploring the films that shocked audiences, challenged Hollywood, and changed fantasy storytelling forever. 1. Pan's Labyrinth, 2006. Released in 2006 and directed by Guillermo del Toro, Pan's Labyrinth redefined what fantasy storytelling could be. Set in post-Civil War Spain, the film follows a young girl named Ophelia who discovers a mysterious labyrinth and encounters strange mythical creatures that may reveal her true destiny. What shocked audiences was the film's combination of childlike fairy tale imagery with extremely dark historical themes. Instead of a comforting fantasy world, the story blends brutal wartime reality with eerie magical elements. The creatures, especially the haunting Pale Man, became instantly iconic and unsettling. Behind the scenes, Del Toro used elaborate practical effects and prosthetic makeup rather than heavy CGI, giving the creatures a disturbingly real presence. Critics praised the film for its artistic ambition, and it won 3 Academy Awards. Today, Pan's Labyrinth is considered one of the greatest dark fantasy films ever made, proving that fantasy can explore serious historical trauma and complex emotions. 2. Excalibur, 1981. When Excalibur was released in 1981, it offered one of the most intense and adult portrayals of the King Arthur legend ever seen on screen. Directed by John Boorman, the film retells the rise and fall of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Unlike earlier family-friendly adaptations, this version leaned heavily into the violent medieval reality and mystical darkness surrounding Arthurian mythology. The film's intense battle scenes, supernatural imagery, and tragic tone earned it an R rating. The production also featured a remarkable cast early in their careers, including Helen Mirren and Liam Neeson. Boorman used atmospheric lighting, shining armor, and Wagner's music to create a mythical yet ominous tone. While critics were initially divided, Excalibur eventually gained cult status. Many fantasy filmmakers credit it as a major influence on later epics, proving that Arthurian legend could be powerful, dark, and cinematic. 3. Conan the Barbarian, 1982. Before superhero franchises dominated Hollywood, Conan the Barbarian brought raw, brutal fantasy storytelling to mainstream cinema. The 1982 film starred Arnold Schwarzenegger as the legendary warrior Conan. The story follows Conan's journey from slavery to vengeance in a harsh mythical world ruled by cult leaders and warlords. What shocked audiences at the time was the film's graphic violence and grim tone, which contrasted sharply with traditional fantasy adventures. Director John Milius drew inspiration from ancient mythology and the works of Robert E. Howard, creating a savage world where survival required strength and brutality. Despite controversy over its violent content, the film became a huge cult success and helped launch Schwarzenegger's Hollywood career. Today, Conan the Barbarian is widely credited with paving the way for darker fantasy epics in cinema. 4. Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992. In 1992, legendary director Francis Ford Coppola delivered one of the most visually extravagant vampire films ever made with Bram Stoker's Dracula, starring Gary Oldman. The film follows the tragic immortal count whose love transcends centuries. While vampire stories were already popular, this version shocked viewers with its gothic intensity, surreal visuals, and mature themes. Coppola famously avoided modern CGI and relied on old-school filmmaking techniques, including optical illusions and theatrical set designs to create dreamlike imagery. The film divided critics at first, but became a major box office success and won 3 Academy Awards. Over time, it has become one of the most influential Gothic fantasy films ever made, redefining how vampire mythology could be portrayed on screen. 5. The Witch, 2015. Released in 2015, The Witch brought historical realism and psychological horror into the fantasy genre. Directed by Robert Eggers, the film is set in 1630s New England and follows a Puritan family confronting mysterious supernatural forces in the wilderness. Instead of traditional fantasy spectacle, the film builds dread through authentic historical dialogue, religious paranoia, and slow-burn storytelling. Audiences were shocked by how unsettling and atmospheric the film felt. The movie also introduced many viewers to Anya Taylor-Joy, whose breakout performance helped launch her career. Though some viewers found its pacing challenging, critics praised the film's authenticity and eerie tone. Today, The Witch is widely regarded as a modern classic that redefined dark folk fantasy for contemporary audiences. 6. The Green Knight, 2021. A24's The Green Knight offered one of the most philosophical and mysterious fantasy films in recent years. Directed by David Lowery, the film reinterprets a medieval Arthurian poem. Starring Dev Patel, the story follows Sir Gawain on a surreal quest to confront a supernatural challenger known as the Green Knight. What surprised audiences was the film's dreamlike pacing and symbolic storytelling. Instead of action-heavy fantasy, it focused on themes of honor, mortality, and personal transformation. The haunting cinematography and mythological imagery gave the film an almost hypnotic tone. Though it divided casual audiences, critics praised its artistic ambition. Over time, The Green Knight has become an example of how modern filmmakers can transform ancient legends into thought-provoking cinematic fantasy. 7. Legend, 1985. Directed by Ridley Scott, Legend remains one of the most visually striking fantasy films of the 1980s. That the story follows a young hero played by Tom Cruise as he attempts to stop the Lord of Darkness from plunging the world into eternal night. The film shocked audiences with its dark fairy tale atmosphere and elaborate creature designs, especially the terrifying portrayal of darkness by Tim Curry. Although the film initially struggled at the box office, its breathtaking set design and practical effects later earned it cult status. Many fantasy fans now consider Legend a visually influential film that inspired later fantasy aesthetics. 8. The Northman, 2022. In 2022, director Robert Eggers returned with The Northman, a brutal Viking revenge epic rooted in Norse mythology. Starring Alexander Skarsgård, the film tells the story of a prince seeking vengeance after his father's murder. What shocked audiences was its raw depiction of Viking rituals, mysticism, and violence, blending historical realism with surreal mythological visions. The film featured elaborate long-take battle sequences and authentic cultural research. Although its dark tone made it less mainstream than other blockbusters, critics praised its commitment to historical and mythological authenticity. Today, The Northman stands as one of the most ambitious mythological revenge sagas in modern cinema. 9. Hellboy, 2019. The 2019 reboot of Hellboy attempted to push comic book fantasy into a darker, more graphic direction. Starring David Harbour, the film followed the demon hero battling ancient witches and supernatural monsters. Unlike earlier adaptations directed by Guillermo del Toro, this version leaned heavily into horror and mythological brutality, which surprised audiences expecting a lighter tone. Although the film struggled critically and commercially, it showcased the risk studios sometimes take when trying to reinvent beloved fantasy characters with a darker edge. Despite mixed reception, the film remains an example of how fantasy properties continue evolving toward more mature storytelling. 10. The Shape of Water, 2017. Another visionary project from Guillermo del Toro, The Shape of Water blended fantasy, romance, and Cold War drama into something completely unique. Starring Sally Hawkins, the film tells the story of a mute woman who forms an unexpected bond with a mysterious aquatic creature held in a government laboratory. While its premise surprised many viewers, critics praised the film's emotional depth and imaginative storytelling. The movie ultimately won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Its success proved that fantasy stories aimed at adults could still achieve both critical acclaim and mainstream recognition, expanding the possibilities of modern fantasy cinema. Dark fantasy films remind us that magic and mythology are not always comforting. They can be mysterious, haunting, and deeply human. These movies pushed the limits of storytelling and proved that fantasy can explore complex themes just as powerfully as any other genre. But now we want to hear from you. Which dark fantasy film shocked you the most, and which one deserves to be on this list? Make sure to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Hollywood Secrets Information for more deep dives into Hollywood history, controversial cinema, and the untold stories behind the movies we love.